My crush Lucia held my hand after chemistry class and asked me not to watch when she live-streamed her sewer slide during third period tomorrow. I called 911 to save her life. 3 years later, at graduation, she slipped a note in my locker that said, "You took my choice away. Now I'm going to take everything from you, piece by piece, until you understand what it's like to lose control." I was 15 when my crush Lucia pulled me aside after chemistry class. We'd been close since 6th grades. "I need you to promise me something," she whispered, her pretty eyes not meeting mine. For a moment, I thought she was going to ask me to the dance. I'd been working up the courage for weeks, but something in her voice made my chest tighten. "Anything," I said. That's when she told me about Friday, how she'd been planning it for months. The teachers who ignored her cries for help, her parents who only cared about her grades. She'd taken her mom's firearm from the locked drawer. The next day, she was going to publicly end her life. She'd planned it all out. A live stream during third period, when Ms. Lillian would be teaching, when Mr. Cole would be in the faculty lounge, when everyone who'd failed her would be watching. She'd make sure they'd see, make sure they'd carry it forever. "But not you," she said, squeezing my hand. "Don't watch. You're the only one who ever really saw me." I stood there frozen, feeling her fingers intertwined with mine, something I'd dreamed about for months, but not like this, never like this. "Lucia, you can't," I whispered. "It's the only way they'll learn," she said. "The only way things will change." That night I didn't sleep. I stared at her Instagram, scrolling through photos where her smile never quite reached her eyes. Had I missed it? The way she'd stopped eating lunch, how she wore long sleeves even when it was warm, the poems she'd started posting, beautiful but dark, so dark. I thought about Ms. Lillian, who was tough but had 3 kids at home, Mr. Cole, who was new and trying his best, the other students who'd see it happen live, the trauma that would ripple through our school like a stone dropped in still water. But Lucia trusted me. She'd held my hand. She'd chosen me to confide in. Wasn't that worth something? By the time 3 a.m. hit, I was typing and deleting texts to her. What if I was overreacting? What if she hated me forever? What if I lost the only girl who'd ever made me feel like I mattered? Then I imagined the alternative. Her empty desk in chemistry, her parents at a funeral instead of graduation, a live stream that could never be unseen, all because I stayed silent. At 5 a.m., I called the sewer slide prevention hotline. They connected me to the police. My voice cracked as I explained everything. The officer's tone grew urgent, asking for details I wished I didn't have. Lucia's full name, her address, the exact time she'd mentioned. "You're saving her life," the officer said. It felt like I was ending it. They got to Lucia at 7:30 a.m., just as she was setting up her phone in her bedroom. The pills were already laid out. The note was already written. The local news called it a mental health crisis intervention. They interviewed our principal, who promised better resources, more counselors, real change. They never used our names, but Lucia knew. She didn't come back to school for 2 months. When she did, she wouldn't look at me, wouldn't answer my texts. Her new friends formed a protective wall around her in the hallways. I heard whispers that I'd betrayed her, that I'd violated her trust, that I only did it because I couldn't handle rejection. The school did change. They hired 2 new counselors, started a peer support program, trained teachers on warning signs. Everyone said I'd done the right thing, but I felt like I'd lost everything. 3 years later, on graduation day, I found a note in my locker. I instantly recognized Lucia's handwriting. What I read made my heart drop. The note was short, but each word felt like a knife twisting in my gut. "You took my choice away. You made me live when I wanted to die. Now I'm going to take everything from you, piece by piece, until you understand what it feels like to lose control of your own life. This isn't over, L." My hands shook as I stuffed the note into my pocket. The graduation ceremony was starting in 20 minutes. My parents were already in the auditorium, saving seats. My cap and gown hung in my locker, waiting, but all I could think about was Lucia, somewhere in this building, planning something. I rushed through the hallways, checking every classroom, every bathroom. Nothing. The school felt eerily empty, with most people already gathering in the auditorium. My footsteps echoed off the walls as I searched, my heart pounding harder with each empty room. Then I saw her. She stood at the end of the main hallway, wearing her graduation gown, her back to me. When she turned around, her face showed no emotion, just cold calculation. She held up her phone and pressed record. I froze. She walked toward me slowly, deliberately, keeping the camera trained on my face. When she was close enough that I could smell her perfume, the same vanilla scent from 3 years ago, she spoke in a voice loud enough for the recording. "Why are you following me? I already told you to leave me alone." I opened my mouth to respond, but she stepped closer, lowering her voice to a whisper only I could hear. "One word and I'll scream. Who do you think they'll believe? The girl who almost unalived herself because of bullying, or the boy who betrayed her trust?" She stepped back, raising her voice again for the camera. "Please, just go away. I don't want any trouble." Then she turned and walked away, leaving me standing there, paralyzed. I understood now. This was her game. She was building a narrative, creating evidence. But evidence of what? I made it to graduation, but I couldn't focus. Every time I scanned the crowd, I found Lucia's eyes on me. She sat 3 rows ahead with her family, the picture of a recovering survivor. When they called her name, she got a standing ovation. The girl who'd overcome so much, the success story. When they called mine, the applause was polite but subdued. I saw the looks. Some people still remembered the rumors from 3 years ago. The boy who who'd called the police on a vulnerable girl, the betrayer. After the ceremony, my parents wanted to take pictures. As we posed by the school sign, I noticed Lucia in the background of every shot, always watching, always recording with her phone. My mom noticed my distraction. "Everything okay, honey?" I forced a smile and nodded. What could I say? That the girl whose life I'd saved was now stalking me? That she'd threatened me? They'd think I was paranoid, or worse, that I was the one harassing her. The next few days passed in a blur of graduation parties and college preparation. I tried to push Lucia from my mind, telling myself it was just an empty threat. Maybe she just needed to vent her anger. Maybe it would pass. Then the posts started appearing. First, it was subtle. A photo on Instagram from someone's graduation party. In the background, barely visible, was me looking in Lucia's direction. The caption read, "Great party," though some people clearly can't take a hint. Then a video surfaced on TikTok. Security footage from the school hallway, showing me following Lucia. The video was edited, cutting out the part where she'd waited for me, showing only me walking behind her. The comments were brutal. Creepy behavior. This is why she tried to, some guys just can't handle rejection. I reported the video, but more kept appearing. Each one carefully edited. Each one painting me as an obsessed stalker who couldn't leave her alone. My Instagram started getting flooded with messages from strangers calling me horrible names. My Facebook was bombarded with friend requests from fake accounts. I tried reaching out to mutual friends, but Lucia had gotten to them first. She'd shown them the videos, told them how I'd been following her, how scared she was. They believed her. Why wouldn't they? She was the victim. She was the one who'd almost died. My parents started noticing my mood changes. I was jumpy, constantly checking my phone, barely sleeping. They asked if something was wrong, but I couldn't find the words. How could I explain that my act of saving someone had turned into my own nightmare? 2 weeks after graduation, I was at the grocery store when I felt someone watching me. I turned to see Lucia at the end of the aisle, phone in hand. She smiled and waved, then typed something. Seconds later, my phone buzzed. A photo of me in the cereal aisle. The caption, "Can't even shop without him showing up. This is getting scary." I abandoned my cart and left immediately, but the damage was done. By the time I got home, the photo was already circulating in our town's Facebook group. People were commenting about calling the police, about protecting Lucia, about how someone should do something about that boy. My mom was waiting in the kitchen when I walked in. Her face was pale, her laptop open on the counter. "We need to talk," she said. She'd seen the posts, the videos, the comments. She wanted to know what was really going on. I tried to explain, but even to my own ears it sounded crazy. A conspiracy by the girl I'd saved? Edited videos? Staged encounters? My mom wanted to believe me. I could see it in her eyes, but doubt crept in. She asked why Lucia would do this. What could she possibly gain? I showed her the note from graduation, but she pointed out it wasn't signed. It could be from anyone. That night, I lay in bed scrolling through my phone, watching my reputation crumble in real time. Friends were unfriending me. College acquaintances were blocking me. 3 years of being known as the guy who saved a life were being erased, replaced by something much darker. Then I noticed something. In one of the videos, a reflection in a window, another person filming. Someone was helping Lucia. She wasn't doing this alone. I screenshot the image and zoomed in. The face was blurry but familiar. Marcus Royval, one of Lucia's new friends. The one who'd been most vocal about protecting her from me. I had my first piece of real evidence, but what could I do with it? Who would believe me? I wonder what Lucia's really thinking with this whole revenge plan she's got going on. She's clearly been planning this for a while, but why wait 3 whole years? There's something about the timing that makes me curious about what else might be going on in her life right now. And more importantly, what was Lucia's endgame? The note said she'd take everything from me piece by piece. My reputation was already in ruins. What came next? My phone buzzed. Another message, this time from an unknown number. "This is just the beginning. Sweet dreams." Attached was a photo of my house, taken from across the street. Tonight, I jumped up and looked out my window. The street was empty, but I knew she was out there, watching, planning, and I was running out of time to figure out how to stop her. I rushed to my parents' bedroom and shook my dad awake. He groaned and checked the clock, but when he saw my face, he sat up immediately. I showed him the photo and explained everything as quickly as I could. My dad grabbed a flashlight and headed outside while my mom called the police. The officers arrived within 15 minutes. They took my statement, examined the photo, and checked the area. They found nothing. No footprints, no evidence anyone had been there. One officer suggested it could have been taken earlier in the day with a timer. The other asked if I'd been having any conflicts with anyone recently. I tried explaining about Lucia, showing them the posts and videos. They took notes, but I could see the skepticism in their eyes. One officer pulled my parents aside. I couldn't hear the conversation, but I saw my mom's worried glances in my direction. After they left, my parents sat me down. My dad suggested maybe I should talk to someone, a therapist perhaps. My mom mentioned that the stress of graduation and starting college could affect people in different ways. They weren't saying they didn't believe me, but they weren't saying they did either. I spent the rest of the night wide awake, refreshing social media obsessively. More posts kept appearing. Photos from different angles at the grocery store I hadn't even noticed being taken. Videos from graduation showing me staring at Lucia. Each post carefully crafted to build a narrative of obsession. By morning, I had 17 missed calls from friends. not to check on me, but to tell me to stop, to leave Lucia alone, to get help. My best friend since middle school sent a long text about how disappointed he was, how he never thought I was that kind of guy. I decided to fight back. I created a document with timestamps, showing how the videos were edited, pointing out the inconsistencies. I wrote a long post explaining my side of the story, about saving Lucia's life, about the note, about everything. Within an hour, my post was gone. Reported for harassment. My account was temporarily suspended for violating community guidelines. Meanwhile, Lucia's posts remained up, gathering more views, more angry comments directed at me. My college orientation was in 3 days. I'd been looking forward to it for months, a fresh start at a school 2 hours away where nobody knew my history. Now I wondered if the story would follow me there too. That afternoon, I drove to the mall to buy supplies for my dorm. I kept my head down, avoiding eye contact with anyone who might recognize me. I was loading bags into my car when I heard a familiar voice. Marcus Royval stood behind me with 2 other guys I recognized from school. They weren't threatening exactly, just standing there, watching. Marcus held up his phone, not recording this time, just showing me the screen. It was a group chat with over 50 members. The group name was Protecting L. He scrolled through the messages, people discussing my whereabouts, sharing sightings, planning ways to intervene if I got too close to Lucia. Some messages were from people I'd never even met, strangers who'd joined the cause after seeing the viral videos. Marcus put his phone away, and the 3 of them walked off without saying a word. The message was clear. I was being watched by an entire network of people who believed I was dangerous. I drove home in a daze. This was bigger than just Lucia now. She'd created a movement, turned herself into a symbol of survival, and me into a symbol of everything wrong with guys who couldn't handle rejection. The truth didn't matter anymore. The narrative had taken on a life of its own. That evening, my mom knocked on my door. She'd been crying. Someone had sent messages to her workplace, warning them about her dangerous son. Her boss had called her in for a meeting. While he wasn't taking any action yet, he'd suggested she might want to take some time off until things calmed down. My dad was in the living room on his laptop, his face grim. He showed me what he'd found. Someone had created a website dedicated to exposing me. It had all the videos, the photos, screenshots of supposed conversations where I'd said disturbing things. The conversations were fake, but they looked real enough. The website had a counter at the bottom. Days since last incident, 0. It updated every time someone reported seeing me near Lucia, even if I was just existing in the same town. My parents were trying to be supportive, but I could see the strain. My mom kept asking if there was something I wasn't telling them. My dad mentioned that maybe I should postpone college for a semester, let things die down. The doubt in their voices hurt more than all the online hate combined. That night, I made a decision. I needed evidence. Real evidence that Lucia was orchestrating this. I started with Marcus Royval. I found his social media profiles, looked through his history. 3 months ago, right around when Lucia returned to school, his posts changed. Suddenly, he was all about mental health awareness, sewer slide prevention, protecting survivors. And in every post about Lucia, there was something subtle, a phrase, a hashtag, something that felt coordinated. I dug deeper, found connections between Marcus and the other people most active in posting about me. They all seemed to have become friends with Lucia around the same time. They all used similar language in their posts. It was organized, planned. Then I found something interesting. A photo from a party 2 weeks before graduation. In the background, barely visible, was Lucia's laptop. The screen showed a document titled Project Restoration. I zoomed in as much as I could. I could make out what looked like phases, timelines, goals. It wasn't much, but it was something. I saved everything, creating my own folder of evidence. But I knew I needed more. I needed someone on the inside, someone who could confirm what Lucia was planning. I thought of Sarah, a girl from our chemistry class who'd been friends with Lucia before everything happened. She'd been one of the few people who hadn't immediately taken sides after the intervention. Maybe she'd listen. I found Sarah working at the bookstore downtown. She saw me coming and her face went tight, but she didn't run or call for help. I approached carefully, keeping my hands visible, maintaining distance. I asked if we could talk. She hesitated, glanced around the empty store, then nodded toward the back corner. We sat at a small reading table, her body tense, ready to bolt. I explained everything as calmly as I could. The note, the videos, the coordination. Sarah listened without interrupting. When I finished, she was quiet for a long moment. Then she told me something that made my blood run cold. Lucia had approached her months ago, wanting her to join what she called her recovery project. She'd explained it as a way to take back control, to show that survivors could be empowered. But the details had made Sarah uncomfortable. The talk of justice, of making sure people understood consequences, of teaching lessons. Sarah had declined to join, and Lucia had cut her off completely. Now Sarah was seeing the results play out online, and she was scared. Not of me, but of what Lucia was capable of. She agreed to help, but carefully. She still had access to some group chats, could see some of the planning. She warned me that Lucia was smart, careful. Everything was designed to look organic, spontaneous. The people helping her genuinely believed they were protecting a victim. Over the next few days, Sarah fed me information. Lucia had phases planned out. First was isolation, cutting me off from support systems. Second was escalation, making me seem seem increasingly dangerous. The third phase was something called resolution, but Sarah couldn't find details about what that meant. I was living in a constant state of anxiety. Every time I left the house, I was photographed. Every move I made was documented and twisted. My parents were getting pressure from all sides. Old friends were cutting contact. The college I was supposed to attend had called about concerns they'd received. Then Lucia made a mistake. She got overconfident. I was at the gas station when she appeared, like always, with her phone out. But this time, she spoke to me directly, quietly, while pretending to text. She told me I could make it all stop. All I had to do was publicly admit that I'd saved her life for selfish reasons, that I'd been obsessed with her, that I'd violated her autonomy. She had a statement prepared. If I posted it, recorded a video saying it, she'd call off her campaign. I asked why she was doing this. Her face hardened. She said I'd stolen her choice, her moment of control. I'd made her into a victim, a statistic, someone to be saved. She'd spent 3 years being treated like broken glass, and it was my fault. Now she was taking back control by showing everyone what I really was. I recorded our conversation on my phone in my pocket. The quality was poor, but you could hear her voice, her words. Finally, I had something concrete, but when I tried to use it, I hit another wall. The audio was too muffled, too easy to claim as fake. Lucia quickly spun it as me trying to create false evidence, proof of how desperate and dangerous I was becoming. The harassment intensified. My parents reached a breaking point. My mom was put on administrative leave from work. Marcus showing up with his phone like some kind of social media bounty hunter is peak modern drama. Forget pitchforks and torches. Now we get group chats and location tracking to run people out of town. My dad's clients were calling, concerned about his family situation. They sat me down and suggested maybe I should stay with my aunt in another state for a while, just until things calmed down. I realized this was exactly what Lucia wanted, to drive me away, to make me run, but I was running out of options, and my family was suffering. I agreed to think about it. That night, Sarah sent me an urgent message. She'd found something about Phase 3, about resolution. It was planned for next week, right before I was supposed to leave for college. She didn't have all the details, but it involved a final confrontation, something that would cement the narrative forever. I stayed up all night thinking. Lucia had built a perfect trap. If I fought back, I looked guilty. If I ran, I looked guilty. If I did nothing, the harassment would continue until something broke. My family was cracking under the pressure. My future was evaporating. But then I remembered something. The school's security cameras, the ones that had captured the edited footage of me following Lucia. The full, unedited versions would show the truth. They'd show her waiting for me, orchestrating the encounter. The problem was getting access. The school was closed for summer, and I definitely couldn't just walk in and ask. But I knew someone who might help. Mr. Cole, the teacher Lucia had planned to traumatize with her live stream. He was still at the school, teaching summer classes. I reached out through email, carefully explaining the situation. I didn't expect a response, but the next morning, he replied. He wanted to meet. We met at a coffee shop the next town over. Mr. Cole looked tired, older than I remembered. He told me he'd been watching what was happening online, and something felt wrong to him. He'd taught both Lucia and me. He knew our characters. He couldn't give me the footage directly, but he could file a request for it as part of a broader review of school safety protocols. It would take time, but it was something. As we talked, he mentioned something that caught my attention. After Lucia had returned to school, she'd written an essay for his class about reclaiming power after trauma. He'd been impressed by her writing, but disturbed by some of the content. The essay had talked about justice, about balance, about making sure those who hurt you understood pain. He'd kept a copy, as he did with all concerning student work. He couldn't share it with me directly, but he suggested that if authorities ever got involved, it might be relevant. I left the meeting with the first real hope I'd felt in weeks, but I also knew I was running out of time. Sarah's warnings about Phase 3 loomed. Lucia was planning something big, something final. The next few days were a whirlwind of preparation. I documented everything I could. Sarah carefully gathered more information. My parents, despite their doubts, started to see the patterns I'd been pointing out. The coordination was too perfect, the escalation too calculated. Then Sarah got the details about Phase 3. Lucia was planning to stage a final confrontation, one where I would appear to attack her. She had people ready to witness it, to film it. She'd studied my patterns, knew where I'd be. It would be the final proof of how dangerous I was, justification for whatever came next. But knowing her plan gave me an advantage. For the first time since this started, I could prepare. I could choose not to be where she expected. I could have my own witnesses. I could finally turn her trap against her. The day arrived faster than expected. I was supposed to be at the bank that morning, something Lucia had learned through her network. Instead, I sent my dad in my place while I stayed home. Sure enough, he reported seeing Lucia there with several people, all positioned strategically, all with phones ready. When I didn't show, I could imagine her frustration, her carefully laid plan disrupted. But I knew she wouldn't give up. She'd adapt, find another opportunity. That afternoon, she did something desperate. She came to my house. I was in my room when I heard the doorbell. My mom answered, and I heard Lucia's voice, sweet and concerned, asking if I was home. She was worried about me, she said. She'd heard I was struggling and wanted to help, to clear the air. My mom, still hoping for a resolution, invited her in. I heard them in the living room, Lucia spinning a story about misunderstandings, about wanting to move forward. My mom called for me to come down. I knew this was it, another trap. But I also knew I couldn't hide forever. I grabbed my phone, started recording, and went downstairs. Lucia sat on our couch, looking small and vulnerable, the perfect victim. When she saw me, her eyes widened with what looked like fear, but I caught the slight smirk before she hid it. She started talking about forgiveness, about moving past everything. She stood up, moved closer to me. I stayed perfectly still, keeping my distance, making sure my phone captured everything. Then she made her move. She suddenly gasped, stepped back, and knocked over a lamp. It shattered on the floor as she screamed that I'd tried to grab her. But my mom had seen everything. I hadn't moved. I'd stayed exactly where I was. For the first time, Lucia's mask slipped. She looked between us, realizing her mistake. My mom had witnessed the truth. The performance hadn't worked. Lucia tried to recover, claiming she'd been startled, that she was jumpy around me, but the damage was done. My mom asked her to leave. As Lucia gathered her things, she looked at me with pure hatred. At the door, she leaned close and whispered that this wasn't over. She'd make sure everyone knew what kind of person I was, but her threat felt hollow now. She'd overplayed her hand. After she left, my mom sat in shocked silence. She'd seen it with her own eyes, the manipulation, the performance. For the first time since this all started, she fully believed me. We called my dad home from work. Together, we reviewed everything I'd documented. The patterns were clear now. The coordination, the escalation, the calculated nature of it all. My parents were angry, not at me, but at themselves for doubting, at Lucia for what she'd put our family through. But we still needed more. Lucia's network was still active, still spreading the narrative. One failed attempt wouldn't stop her. We needed something definitive. That's when Mr. Cole called. He'd managed to get the security footage through proper channels. He couldn't share it with me directly, but he'd reviewed it as part of the safety protocol assessment. What he'd seen had concerned him enough that he'd felt obligated to report it to the school administration and recommend they involve law enforcement. The footage clearly showed Lucia waiting for me, positioning herself, preparing her phone. It showed her approaching me, not the other way around. It contradicted every claim she'd made about that encounter. Things moved quickly after that. The school administration, worried about liability, launched their own investigation. They found more footage, more evidence of coordination. Some of Lucia's helpers, when questioned officially, admitted to being asked to film certain encounters, to post certain things. The house of cards was starting to collapse. Sarah risked everything to provide one final piece of evidence. Screenshots from the planning chat, where Lucia had explicitly outlined her goals, her phases, her intention to destroy my life as payback for saving hers. The messages were damning, showing clear intent and malice. But even as the truth started to emerge, I felt no satisfaction. Lucia was clearly struggling with mental health issues, trauma from her sewer slide attempt and the aftermath. She'd channeled her pain into revenge, but it came from a place of genuine hurt. The online narrative began to shift. People who'd been so quick to condemn me were now unsure. Some apologized. Others simply disappeared, deleting their posts and comments. The website about me went offline. My parents' workplaces backed off. Friends began reaching out, tentatively, apologetically. The college called to say they were no longer concerned about the allegations. But the damage was done. My reputation was in tatters. My family had suffered. My trust in people was shattered. And Lucia, despite everything coming to light, still had supporters who believed I'd somehow manipulated the evidence. I thought about the girl I'd tried to save 3 years ago, the one with pretty eyes who'd held my hand. I'd wanted so badly to help her, to be her hero. Instead, I'd become her villain, the face of everyone who'd taken away her agency. As I prepared to leave for college, trying to salvage what was left of my future, I received one last message from an unknown number. This time, it wasn't a threat. It was an apology, sort of. The message explained that Lucia had been hospitalized, getting help she needed. It said she understood now that what she'd done was wrong, but that she still couldn't forgive me for saving her that day. She'd needed to feel in control of something, and destroying me had given her that feeling, however briefly. I deleted the message without responding. There was nothing left to say. My parents drove me to college on a gray August morning. We didn't talk much on the drive. We were all exhausted, worn down by months of harassment and fear, but we were together. We'd survived. As we unloaded my things at the dorm, I noticed other families doing the same. Normal families with normal problems. Kids excited about their futures, parents proud and worried in equal measure. I envied them their simplicity. My roommate seemed nice enough. He didn't recognize my name, didn't know my story. It was a fresh start, or as fresh as it could be with the internet existing. I knew the story would follow me eventually. Someone would make the connection, spread the word, but for now, I could pretend to be just another freshman. Security footage that perfectly shows everything. How convenient that Mr. Cole just happens to get access right when it's needed most. The timing of Lucia's desperate house visit feels oddly calculated too. She's been so careful until now. Why suddenly get sloppy in front of witnesses? That night, alone in my dorm room, I thought about choices. The choice I'd made to save Lucia. The choice she'd made to destroy me. The choices we'd both have to live with forever. I'd saved her life, but I'd also taken something from her. She'd tried to take everything from me in return. Neither of us had won. We'd both lost something in the exchange. My phone buzzed with a text from my mom, checking in, then one from Sarah, wishing me luck. Even Mr. Mr. Cole sent a brief email hoping I was settling in well. These people had stood by me when everything seemed lost. That had to count for something. I looked around my small dorm room, at the blank walls waiting to be filled with new memories, new experiences. This wasn't the college experience I'd imagined, but it was mine. The next morning, I woke up to my roommate's alarm. He groaned, threw a pillow at it, and asked if I wanted to grab breakfast. I said yes. It was a small thing, a normal thing. But after months of anything but normal, it felt like a victory. Classes started. I threw myself into them, grateful for the distraction. Psychology, ironically, became my favorite. Understanding why people do what they do, how trauma shapes behavior, how pain can twist into something destructive. Weeks passed. The story didn't follow me as quickly as I'd feared. When it finally did surface, my hallmates' reactions surprised me. Some were curious, some sympathetic. A few avoided me, but most seemed to understand that there were two sides to every story. I even made friends, real ones, who knew my history and chose to know me anyway. We didn't talk about it much, but when we did, they listened without judgment. One night, studying in the library, I saw a news article about Lucia. She was speaking at a mental health awareness event, sharing her story of survival. The article mentioned the boy who'd called for help, saving her life. It didn't name me, and the tone was neutral, factual. She was healing in her own way, finding her own path forward. I closed the article and went back to my studies. We were both moving on, separately, carrying our scars and our stories. The girl with pretty eyes who'd wanted to die, the boy who'd saved her and paid the price, two kids who'd made choices that changed everything. My phone buzzed, a text from a study group asking if I was coming. I packed up my things and headed out into the night, toward voices and laughter and the possibility of normal college drama that had nothing to do with the past. The truth was, I'd do it again. Even knowing the cost, I'd still make that call, because Lucia was alive, troubled, angry, but alive. She had the chance to heal, to grow, to become whoever she was meant to be. That had to be worth something. As I walked across campus, I thought about second chances, how Lucia had gotten hers even if she hadn't wanted it, how I was getting mine now, building a life beyond what had happened. We'd probably never speak again. The damage was too deep, the hurt too raw, but somewhere out there, she was living the life I'd helped give back to her. And here I was, living mine. It wasn't the ending either of us had planned, but it was an ending we could both live with. The first sign that my fresh start wasn't as fresh as I'd hoped came during my second month at college. I was walking back from my psychology lecture when I noticed a familiar figure across the quad. My stomach dropped. Marcus Royval stood near the student union, talking to someone from my dorm. I ducked into the library, my heart racing. Marcus being here couldn't be a coincidence. The college was 2 hours from home, and he'd never mentioned plans to visit. I watched through the window as he showed something on his phone to the student, who nodded and pointed toward my dorm building. That evening, I found my roommate acting strange. He kept glancing at me while pretending to study, and his phone buzzed constantly with messages. When I asked if everything was okay, he mumbled something about being tired and left for the common room. Over the next few days, the atmosphere in my dorm shifted. Conversations stopped when I entered rooms. People who'd been friendly suddenly had somewhere else to be. The study group stopped inviting me. My new friends became mysteriously busy. I recognized the pattern immediately. The isolation phase, just like before. But how? Lucia was supposed to be getting help, focusing on her own recovery, unless she wasn't. Sarah texted me late one night with a warning. She'd seen activity in some of the old group chats. Lucia had been discharged from the hospital weeks ago. She'd convinced her doctors she was better, that she understood her mistakes. But Sarah had heard through mutual friends that Lucia had been planning something new, something she called her final project. I started documenting everything again. The strange looks, the whispered conversations, the way people suddenly had their phones out when I walked by. But this time, I wasn't going to wait for things to escalate. I needed to get ahead of whatever Lucia was planning. My psychology professor had assigned us to write about trauma responses and recovery. As I researched, I found myself understanding Lucia's behavior more clearly. The need for control, the inability to let go, the way trauma could manifest as aggression toward those perceived as taking away agency. It didn't excuse what she was doing, but it helped me see the pattern. Then I found the Instagram account. Truth About Predators had started posting 3 weeks ago, right when Lucia was discharged. The posts were careful, no names mentioned, but the details were unmistakable. Stories about a male student who had a history of stalking vulnerable women, security footage that looked suspiciously like my dorm building, photos taken from angles that suggested someone had been following me. The account grew quickly. My college had a strong culture around protecting survivors, and the posts were crafted to tap into that. Soon, I started seeing people I didn't recognize watching me in the dining hall, following me between classes. I tried reporting the account, but it kept popping up under new names, each time more sophisticated, more believable. Lucia had learned from her mistakes. This time, she wasn't directly connected to anything. She was letting others do the work, creating a movement that seemed organic. My grades started slipping. How could I focus on calculus when I knew people were photographing me in class? How could I write essays when my laptop might be compromised? The paranoia was suffocating, which was exactly what she wanted. One night, my roommate finally broke. He showed me the messages he'd been getting. Anonymous accounts warning him about living with a dangerous person, links to articles about about campus safety, stories that sounded just real enough to plant doubt. He said he'd requested a room change for his own safety. I spent that night in the library, afraid to go back to my dorm. That's when I met Theo. He was a junior, working the late shift at the help desk. He noticed I'd been there every night that week and asked if I was okay. Something about his genuine concern broke through my walls. I found myself telling him everything, not the whole story, but enough, about someone from my past trying to destroy my reputation, about feeling trapped and alone. Theo listened without judgment. Then he told me about his freshman year, when his ex had started a smear campaign against him after their breakup, how he'd learned to document everything, to build a support network, to refuse to let someone else's pain destroy his future. He introduced me to others who'd faced similar situations, not a formal support group, just students who understood what it was like to be targeted. They taught me practical things, how to check for hidden cameras, how to secure my social media, how to recognize manipulation tactics. But Lucia was escalating faster than I could adapt. The Instagram accounts became more specific, more damaging. They started including details that only someone from our high school would know, twisted just enough to sound sinister. My name was never mentioned, but anyone who knew me could connect the dots. The campus security called me in for a meeting. They'd received multiple reports about my behavior, nothing specific enough to take action on, but enough to create a file. They suggested I might benefit from counseling, gave me pamphlets about appropriate behavior. The security officer's expression made it clear he thought where there was smoke, there was fire. I was losing again. But this time, I had people who believed me. Theo and his friends helped me create my own documentation. We tracked the IP addresses of the anonymous accounts, found patterns in the posting times, identified stock photos being used to create fake victims. Then Sarah sent another urgent message. She'd overheard something terrifying. Lucia was coming to campus, not just visiting, but moving here. She'd convinced her parents that being near me would help her healing process, that facing her trauma was necessary for recovery. They'd helped her get an apartment off campus. The next phase was beginning, and I knew it would be worse than before. On campus, she'd have access to everything. My schedule, my habits, my safe spaces. She could orchestrate encounters that would look random, but weren't. She could build her narrative in real time. I considered leaving, transferring schools, starting over somewhere else, but running would confirm every lie she'd spread, and there was no guarantee she wouldn't follow me again. This had to end here. Theo helped me prepare. We mapped out campus, identifying cameras and blind spots. We created a buddy system, ensuring I was never alone in vulnerable situations. We even reached out to Mr. Cole, who provided a written statement about what he'd witnessed, though we knew it wouldn't carry much weight here. Marcus playing detective with his phone while pretending to be casual visitor is peak. I'm definitely not here to cause drama energy. Buddy, everyone knows you don't travel 2 hours just to admire campus architecture. The day Lucia arrived on campus, I felt it immediately. The atmosphere shifted. People who'd started to doubt the rumors suddenly had new conviction. Fresh stories circulated. New witnesses came forward with concerns. I saw her for the first time outside the psychology building. She looked different, healthier, more confident. She was talking to a group of students, gesturing animatedly. When she noticed me, she didn't react, just continued her conversation as if I didn't exist. But I knew this was calculated. She was establishing herself as a presence on campus, building relationships, creating her network. Every interaction was a move in her game. The encounters started small. She'd appear in the coffee shop right after I arrived, forcing me to decide whether to stay or leave. She'd sit in the back of the lecture hall for my psychology class, even though she wasn't enrolled. She was everywhere and nowhere, visible but untouchable. My new friends started getting targeted. Theo received anonymous threats. Others found their social media hacked, embarrassing photos posted. The message was clear. Supporting me came with a cost. Some distanced themselves. I couldn't blame them, but others, like Theo, doubled down. He said he'd faced bullies before and wasn't about to let another one win. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. My psychology professor pulled me aside after class. She'd noticed Lucia attending lectures without being enrolled. She'd also received several anonymous emails about me that felt orchestrated. As someone who studied human behavior, she recognized manipulation when she saw it. She couldn't intervene directly, but she suggested I look into the college's policies on harassment and stalking. Not to file a report, since that would likely backfire, but to understand my rights and options. She also mentioned that the college took unauthorized access to classes seriously. That gave me an idea. Instead of defending against Lucia's attacks, I could document her actual violations, attending classes she wasn't enrolled in, accessing buildings with someone else's ID, creating a hostile environment for enrolled students. Theo and I spent weeks carefully documenting everything. We didn't focus on the anonymous accounts or the rumors. Instead, we tracked Lucia's physical presence, when she attended my classes, when she appeared in my dorm building without authorization, when she photographed me without consent. The evidence pile grew. Security footage of her tailgating into restricted buildings, sign-in logs showing she'd lied about her reasons for being on campus, photos of her taking pictures of me during lectures. But I knew documentation alone wouldn't stop her. She needed to overplay her hand again, like she had at my house. I needed to create a situation where her mask would slip in front of witnesses. The opportunity came during a campus safety workshop. The topic was bystander intervention, and I knew Lucia wouldn't miss the chance to attend. Sure enough, she was there, sitting with a group of students she'd befriended. During the discussion portion, the facilitator asked about personal experiences with feeling unsafe on campus. I raised my hand. Calmly, without naming names, I described being followed between classes, photographed without consent, and having someone attend my lectures without being enrolled. I watched Lucia's face tighten. This wasn't part of her script. When the facilitator asked follow-up questions, I provided specific details. The dates, the times, the locations. Other students started nodding, recognizing the behaviors. Lucia couldn't help herself. She interrupted, saying that sometimes people misinterpret innocent actions as threatening, that maybe the person I was describing had their own reasons for being in those places. Her voice was controlled, but I could see the anger underneath. The facilitator, trained in recognizing manipulation, picked up on the dynamic immediately. She redirected the conversation, but I saw her make a note. After the workshop, she asked to speak with both Lucia and me separately. I went first, providing my documentation. The facilitator's expression grew more concerned as she reviewed it. This wasn't about rumors or social media anymore. This was about concrete policy violations. When Lucia emerged from her meeting, her face was flushed. She'd been informed that attending classes without enrollment was grounds for removal from campus, that photographing students without consent violated privacy policies, that she needed to provide legitimate reasons for her presence in campus buildings. But Lucia wasn't done. That night, the anonymous accounts exploded with new content. Fake screenshots of messages I'd supposedly sent, doctored photos suggesting inappropriate behavior, a coordinated campaign to destroy me before the administration could act. My phone rang at 2 a.m. It was Theo, panicked. Someone had called the police, reporting that I was planning something dangerous. Multiple anonymous tips had come in. The police were looking for me. I stayed calm, called campus security myself, and explained the situation. I was in my dorm room, exactly where I was supposed to be. When the officers arrived, I cooperated fully. They quickly realized the reports were false, but the damage was done. Another file, another record of police involvement. The next morning, I made a decision. I was done playing defense. I walked into the administration building and filed a formal complaint. Not about the rumors or the social media campaign, but about the documented policy violations, the unauthorized class attendance, the illegal photography, the false police reports. I named Lucia directly, provided all my evidence, the security footage, the witness statements, the pattern of behavior. I also included Mr. Cole's statement and the documentation from high school, establishing a pattern of harassment. The administration had to act. This wasn't about he said, she said anymore. This was about clear violations with evidence. They launched an investigation. Lucia tried to spin it as retaliation, but the evidence was too strong. The security footage didn't lie. The false police reports could be traced. Her own friends, when questioned officially, admitted she'd asked them to watch me, to report my movements. The investigation took 2 weeks. During that time, Lucia escalated desperately. She staged another confrontation, this time in the dining hall, trying to provoke a reaction. But I was ready. I kept my distance, stayed calm, let her performance play out in front of hundreds of witnesses. When she realized I wouldn't engage, she made her biggest mistake. She grabbed my arm as I tried to leave, screaming that I was running away again, that I couldn't face what I'd done. But this time, dozens of phones captured the truth. Me trying to leave peacefully, her physically preventing me, her aggression, not mine. Security intervened. The whole incident was recorded on multiple cameras. There was no way to edit or spin what had happened. Lucia had finally shown her true face in a way that couldn't be denied. The administration's decision came down a week later. Lucia was banned from campus. Her unauthorized presence would be considered trespassing. The false police reports had been referred to local authorities. Several students who'd helped spread false information received warnings. But even in defeat, Lucia tried one last manipulation. She posted a long message on social media about being silenced, about powerful institutions protecting predators. Some people believed her. They always would. But the majority saw through it now. The evidence was too overwhelming. I thought it was over. But a month later, I received a letter. Not from Lucia, but from her parents. They apologized for not seeing what their daughter was doing. They explained that she was getting real help now, intensive therapy with specialists who understood her condition. They thanked me for saving her life 3 years ago, even though she couldn't see it that way. They also included a letter from Lucia. I hesitated before opening it. Her handwriting was different, less controlled. She didn't apologize exactly, but she acknowledged what she'd done. She wrote about the therapy, about understanding her need for control, about learning to live with the choice I'd taken from her. She ended by saying she was transferring to a school across the country, that we'd never cross paths again. I didn't respond. There was nothing to say, but I kept the letter as a reminder that even our darkest choices can come from places of deep pain. The rest of my freshman year passed quietly. The rumors faded. New scandals replaced old ones. Some people still looked at me suspiciously, but most moved on. I rejoined study groups, made new friends, rebuilt what had been torn down. Theo became my closest friend. We'd been through something intense together, and that created a bond. He introduced me to his girlfriend, Margaret, who'd had her own experience with a stalker. The three of us formed our own support network. coursework. My grades recovered. My psychology professor became a mentor, helping me understand not just what had happened, but why. I wrote my final paper on trauma responses and the cycle of victim and aggressor. It was the best work I'd ever done. Sarah stayed in touch. She was proud of how I'd handled everything, how I'd found a way to fight back without becoming cruel myself. She was applying to law school, inspired by seeing how the system could work when properly engaged. Mr. Cole sent an email near the end of the year. He'd heard about what happened at college and wanted me to know he was proud of how I'd handled it. He reminded me that saving a life was never wrong, even when the person couldn't appreciate it. Summer arrived with its promise of a fresh start. I decided to stay on campus, taking classes and working in the library. Lucia's parents writing to thank him for saving their daughter's life while she was actively trying to destroy his seems oddly timed. The whole family dynamic here feels strange. Where were they during all this stalking and harassment that apparently required intensive therapy with specialists? I needed to reclaim this space as mine, to build new memories that weren't tainted by fear and paranoia. One evening, I was studying in my favorite spot when my phone buzzed. For a moment, my heart raced, expecting another anonymous threat. But it was just my mom, sending pictures from a family barbecue. Normal, everyday life continuing despite everything. I realized then that Lucia hadn't won. She'd tried to take everything from me piece by piece, but I'd rebuilt each time. My family still loved me. I had real friends who'd stood by me. I was still in college, still moving toward my future. The scars were there. I still checked over my shoulder more than I should. I still felt my pulse quicken when I saw someone who looked like her, but I was healing too, just like she was. As I packed up my books that night, I thought about the strange symmetry of it all. 3 years ago, I'd saved Lucia's life and changed both our futures. She'd spent years trying to destroy mine in return, but in the end, we were both still here, still fighting, still trying to find our way forward. The campus was quiet as I walked back to my dorm. Summer students moved in small groups, laughing about something on someone's phone. The normalcy of it felt like a gift. I was just another student walking home, anonymous in the best way. My phone buzzed again. This time it was Theo, asking if I wanted to grab pizza with him and Margaret. I smiled and texted back, yes. Life was moving forward, one normal moment at a time. That's all I'd wanted from the beginning. Not to be a hero or a villain, just to be a regular college student worried about exams and weekend plans. Lucia had tried to take that from me, but she'd failed. I was still here, still myself, still choosing to see the good in people despite everything. As I entered my dorm, I made a decision. I would take the lessons from this experience, but I wouldn't let it define me. I'd saved a life once and paid a price for it, but I'd also learned to save my own life, to fight for my own future. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but they'd be normal ones. Classes to attend, papers to write, friends to meet. The kind of problems I'd dreamed of having during those dark days when Lucia's campaign was at its worst. I climbed the stairs to my room, feeling lighter than I had in months. Whatever came next, I was ready for it. Not because I was strong or special, but because I'd learned that sometimes the best revenge is simply refusing to be destroyed. The door to my room closed behind me with a quiet click. Outside, life on campus continued. Inside, I opened my laptop and started working on my summer coursework. Just another student, just another night, just another step toward whatever future I could build. It wasn't the ending either of us had planned 3 years ago, but it was real, and it was mine, and that was enough. Thanks for hanging out and letting me toss in my clever takes. Always fun being your witty sidekick for the ride. Catch you on the flip side. If you made it to the end, drop a comment. I love reading all your comments.